we've got a copy of this. All right. So there is a Q&A option. So if you've got questions, please put your questions in the Q&A box. There's also a chat if you want to chat. Just in the chat itself, if you could just let us know where you're actually beaming in from, that would be awesome. Just helps to build the connectivity. So we really last, well, I'm going to get things started with Natalie and ask her some questions. There's going to be plenty of opportunity for you guys to ask questions as well. So we want to make that time available. So Cara, you're in Brisbane. Welcome. Hey, Cara. So by way of introduction, just be one sec. So Nat, we've caught up a few times and had conversations, both personally because I love what you do. You're the thought leader for the Transformative Technologies sleep tech sector, and the reason for that is you've got an extensive experience in sleep, and you got your PhD in cognitive psychology, studying sleep and memory and how the brain processes information during the sleep cycle. So super, your credentials are just out of control, and it's always great to talk to you. So welcome, Nat.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me, as always.
So Christine, welcome. Like I suggested, there is a Q&A. There's going to be plenty of time to ask questions. So do use the Q&A box to ask questions, and we'll make sure that we get them answered. Please feel free to use the chat, drop a line, let us know where you're from. But to get things started, just, we are in an unprecedented moment in time now with Corona. It's impacting everybody across the globe. And it's and people individually are managing this in their own ways. And some of the things that we can lose sight of is the importance around, with something like a pandemic, is to make sure that we're caring for our health and our well-being, and sleep's an integral part of that. So I guess from your point of view, in talking with people day in, day out about sleep, how are you seeing this show up in your world?
Yeah, that's a really great question. It's interesting because we've had this conversation throughout, right? We've met a few times. When things first started to get crazy, we had a conversation, and then we met again a few weeks ago, and here we are. And I'm thinking of how things have progressed, and the collective. It felt as though there was this kind of collective uprising, and okay, let's use this pandemic to better ourselves. Let's use this quarantine period to, get some stuff done. And we all kind of had that momentum, right? Well, here's the thing about momentum is that it's often driven by stress hormones. And so it can be a really good adaptive way to cope with your stress, to clean the entire house, right? And that hits two birds with one stone, because it gives you a sense of control in a situation in which you feel completely out of control, and it helps to discharge some of those stress neurotransmitters. So awesome, great. I think we've all kind of reached a tipping point. Maybe not all of us, but what I've noticed, at least in the people that I'm talking to, my clients and friends and family, and myself, is that that kind of burning the candle at both ends is not sustainable. And I think we're all collectively running out of steam at this point. And we're still in the same place of uncertainty and anxiety as we were a month ago.
Yeah.
If anything, we're even closer to some sort of a tipping point. And so here we are. We've kind of burned ourselves out, and I'm noticing that, and that's coming through in a lot of people's reports of how stressed they feel across the day. People are, when you feel burned out and you don't have as much of those arousal or activating neurotransmitters, you crash. And when you crash, the emotions become a lot more salient. And also it starts to interrupt your sleep because you have kind of burnt the system out. And here we are, we're exhausted, and yet, we can't sleep. So I think that's the main thing that I've noticed at this particular juncture of how this is showing up for people.
Yeah, I guess it's like, making sure that our immune system's at its best. It's integral to ensure that we're getting good sleep. So I guess off the back of that, like, what are some fundamental tips that you would give at this point to help maintain sleep amongst the mania that's happening?
Yeah, great question. And as I mentioned before, these arousal neurotransmitters, these stress neurotransmitters, they also, these also play a role in your sleep-wake cycle. So if you have a lot of stress across the day, that's going to elevate your cortisol levels, for instance. Now, cortisol has to be very, very low in order for you to go to sleep. So by managing your stress, you are facilitating sleep. But then also, if you're not getting good sleep, then what's your cortisol rhythm going to do? It's going to give you a bump of cortisol to compensate for the fact that you didn't get as much sleep, which, thank you, body, for giving me this extra little activation to get me through the day. But then that, following day, you're going to be more stressed out. So in this way, your sleep also informs your stress. So here we have that cyclical relationship that, some people would describe it as a vicious cycle if, wrench gets thrown into that. So really, and then, you throw the immune system, which is related to both sleep and stress. It's kind of, the missing link between those two things. So, and it's absolutely uber crucial right now that we are getting enough sleep, lowering our stress levels as much as possible so that we can boost our immune system, so that we can fight the virus ultimately, right? So what do we do then, to kind of break this cycle of being too stressed to sleep and then getting so little sleep that it stresses you out and kind of, this vicious cycle, as it were. And, I'm a huge proponent of just taking time to pause. Just take a deep breath and, maybe even feel in to the emotional landscape that you're experiencing in this moment, and not trying to change it, just being present with it and just sort of observing it and allowing it to be there. And it's really powerful. A lot of people don't, unless they've done this, experience is the best teacher. And until people have done this, it's difficult to understand that feeling of release that you get simply by acknowledging the fact that you're having an emotion right now, that you're having an emotional response. What's our typical response? I don't want to feel that. Push it away, resist, which causes more of, the stress response. That's essentially what anxiety is, resisting a natural, physiological response. So taking time to pause is absolutely crucial for that. The other thing is limiting social media. I think we're all like learning this lesson that you have to detox from your social media and from the news sites as much as possible. And especially, making sure that you're not doing that right before bed and getting that burst of cortisol. There's a lot of divisiveness on social media right now. There's a lot of, scary news out there. A lot of these things are influencing our stress, our nervous system. And the closer you do that to bedtime, the more likely it is that cortisol is going to increase, and then you're going to be kind of, lying awake. If you're not lying awake, then that cortisol it also increases across the night, because there's this like 24-hour rhythm to cortisol, right? And if it increases if it's already elevated, then that time that it increases about halfway through the night, it's going to wake you up. Usually we have an increase in cortisol to kind of transition us into REM sleep, and dreaming sleep, allow us to have dream states. But it has to be within this kind of this like Goldilocks thing where it has to elevate enough to switch us into REM sleep, but not so elevated that it wakes us up. So if your rhythm, your cortisol rhythm is naturally elevated, then it's going to wake you up. So people may be experiencing more nighttime awakenings as a function of that. So, you can fight that by making sure that, you turn off the news, turn off the social media, take a break at least before bedtime.
Yeah. So I guess it's fair to say that these sort of responses are natural in this at this time with everything that's going on. But it's also an opportunity to really use this to check in and create really good habits, like pausing, like you said, and just being willing to feel the emotions that are there without, what we resist persists. So it's like to be conscious of that feeling and just feel it and allow it to flow through. So then, in my experience, it's like releasing the emotion is such a powerful thing to do. It's like we don't want to feel it, and then it becomes this unconscious anxiety that builds up in the background. But by just checking in, what am I feeling? And then feeling it, it just flows through. And it's just like, what am I feeling now? And through this process, the body brings us back into this homeostasis that we are in a state of well-being. We haven't got this built up energy there. So I appreciate your point. I think it's fantastic. And then the other thing is like limiting social media, right? There's like a big spectrum of stories out there that, and it depends on where you want to jump in as to what they say, from conspiracy theories right through to like we really need to be very, very careful. So before I jump into one more question, I just want to acknowledge everybody online: Alison, Christine, Esther, Glenn, Helen, Jeffrey, Warren, Cara, Nathan, Seth, Simone, Zenik. Thanks so much to everybody for jumping on. Thanks for your patience as well. We had initially intended to stream this to live, but for whatever reason, there's it wouldn't push through despite multiple tries. So thanks for making the journey over here onto Zoom. Really appreciate it. We do want to allow plenty of time to have your questions answered. So please do in the Q&A, ask your questions now. We'll make sure they get answered. So Natalie is a fantastic resource as a sleep and dream coach, someone that I often have consultations with to help. For me now, it's in the dreaming space. I really feel like my sleep's under control, so it's now exploring dreams. So I guess, does anybody have a question at this point? Just pop it into the Q&A. So we looked at like pausing, limiting social media. So if you are there any things like, say, with these additional nighttime awakenings that we might experience? Because that's a common thing, like probably not even just now, but for a lot of people is to wake up at, say, 3 a.m. and then not be able to get back to sleep, or have ongoing awakenings throughout the night, which is disrupting the quality of their sleep. What are some practical things that they can do if they find themselves in that situation?
Yeah, great question. So I also wanted to address something that you said earlier, which is that this is totally normal, everything that we're going through. And I appreciate that you said that, because one of the things that we see when people present with, symptoms pertaining to insomnia is that there's this, we can have a particular type of obsession with like a particular type of insomnia in which we're obsessed with our own sleep. And so to give people this, seems like it's just like one more thing to worry about. Like, oh yeah, now I also have to worry about my sleep. So really just being kind to yourself, and that goes for your stress levels too. If you're stressed out, of course you are. We're going through, a global crisis right now, collective trauma. There's going to be stress there. And that's why that pausing and allowing yourself to really feel that is so important, because you're honoring what's going on and how that affects you. And that's very true for sleep as well. So people, that's something that comes up a lot, is people are waking up, they're struggling to fall asleep. That's one thing. But then also kind of waking up in the middle of the night. So that's sleep onset insomnia and sleep maintenance insomnia, having a hard time maintaining sleep. So a couple of things that can, and I've seen this in a few articles coming up, but this is true whether or not you're in a global pandemic situation, but it's very specific to this situation because we're not, we don't have those early morning commutes that we need to get up for. Sometimes, we'll have like early morning meetings, but we're less tied to a specific schedule. So it's going to be really tempting for us to sleep in and perhaps not really keep that consistent sleep schedule, especially if we're a night owl operating in a day lark, morning lark world, right? So, this is a wonderful opportunity for me to synchronize my sleep schedule, more with my circadian rhythm or my, my morningness, whether I'm a morning person or an evening person. So that's okay. The issue is when you're not consistent with it, because when you have inconsistent sleep, what you tend to see is an uptick in cortisol. Because remember, cortisol is an arousal neurotransmitter as well as a stress hormone that helps you, it compensates for when you have lost sleep. So if you delay your bedtime, which may feel fine because, hey, you don't have anything, to do early in the morning, then you may oversleep. And then the following night, you're going to be more likely to delay your bedtime, but you might have an early morning meeting and then you truncate your sleep because you've delayed your bedtime, but you still have to wake up at 6 a.m. or whatever it is. And now you've only gotten, 6 hours of sleep. And so that's when the cortisol is going to kick in and kick your butt, and you're going to be regretting it. So maintaining that consistent sleep schedule, and that's your bedtime and your wake time and the amount of sleep that you're getting in there, even on weekends, is going to be absolutely crucial, even though it's kind of like always a weekend here now. But the other thing is, this is a nice little hack that you can use if you wake up in the middle of the night, or if you're having a hard time falling asleep, is you can put like a cold compress on your head. Research shows that if you just cool down you can cool down any part of the brain really, and then it will lower the blood flow, and then lower the neural activity happening in that part of the brain. When you're having a hard time sleeping, it's usually because there's some sort of planning happening. There's some sort of, thinking about or ruminating, which usually happens here, some sort of like self-referential thinking that's keeping you from just drifting off to sleep. So what you can do is you can just cool down and that all happens, by the way, in the frontal lobe. So if you just cool that area of the brain down, it can kind of calm down that mental chatter.
Cool. So consistency, and I know for me, like living in the entrepreneurial world, we tend to burn the candle at both ends, and then you play catch up at some point where you have a big sleep. But what you're suggesting is that's actually detrimental to our sleep behavior ongoing, but also to probably our well-being and our health. Is that fair to say?
And it depends. It's all about consistency. So if your body is used to a nice big oversleep on the weekends, and you don't have an issue with that, then you could probably pull that off. However, if you are noticing issues with your sleep, one of the first things that we suggest for people that are having symptoms of insomnia or any sorts of sleep issues is maintaining a consistent sleep schedule. So again, it's all about what's like feeling into your body, what you need. Same thing is true for naps. If you always take a nap, for a 20-minute nap in the afternoon, and that's just what you always do, and you're consistent with that, great. Your body has adapted to that. It's when we have these huge shifts that our body isn't used to that basically triggers jet lag. And so our body tries to compensate for that. And, it's not just the fact that we're losing sleep because, hey, you got plenty of sleep. It's that we've kind of thrown our circadian rhythm off in the process.
You mentioned some before that I think it's worth just touching on a little bit more, and because a lot of people may not be aware of the distinction, like biologically, there's a difference between how some of us are wired between being a night owl and a morning lark, and today's society is geared towards the morning lark. Do you mind just talking a little bit about the difference between a night owl and a morning lark, and how just for the sake of creating awareness for the people on the call. And because we can often go to the wrongness of ourselves and go, oh, well, I don't like to go to bed early, or, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And a lot of that is societal.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of the things in the DSM have little to do with right or wrong, normal, abnormal, because those are all, societal constructs. And so if you have somebody with, so another thing is called delayed sleep phase or disorder. So this is somebody who just cannot go to sleep before 3, 4 a.m. And then they have to sleep in, until well into the afternoon. This is just, and really that's not a disorder. It's only a disorder when you pop that person into a society that requires that they work a 9 to 5, right? And so these are your blessed people, your blessed Uber drivers that take you to the airport at, for your 4 a.m. flight. Like, thank you. The world would not operate without the night owls, working the third shift, making sure that 7-Eleven is open, and, and then being self-employed and being able to kind of operate in that environment as well. I know a lot of people that had to kind of shift into that. So yeah, you have your morning larks. These are people that they operate better in the morning. They, tend to naturally want to go to sleep earlier. And then, the night owls are the ones who tend to delay their sleep. They feel most alert at night. And, you have what's called a chronotype, the one that you typically identify with, but then other factors you can shift in and out of it. So it's not like you're just always that one way. There is a gene, the clock gene, that's related to this, but as we know, genes get turned on and off all the time. So for instance, teenagers who sleep forever, it feels like, they are such night owls. They tend to align more with that chronotype. And then as they get older, they kind of shift into more of maybe like a morning type, but that's probably because we have to operate in a society that really values morning types. And then the older we get and into sort of old age, we become super, super morning people, and that's why we have the early bird special, eating dinner at 4 p.m. because they're typically asleep by 7 or something like that. So, and the more delayed you are as a teenager, the more advanced you will be in old age. So that's kind of interesting. Now, I've noticed myself, actually, I am a tried and true morning person. I love working in the morning. I feel my best in the morning. However, something about this quarantine situation, and I work from home, so there's really no reason why this should have, there's no change to my sleep schedule, but for some reason I've shifted into a night owl and I feel my best at around 7 p.m. And I'm like, wow, I haven't felt this way since I was a teenager. So there's probably some relationship to stress there. I'm not sure. I'm not, because this is the first I've ever experienced it. So
again, I guess it's not going to the wrongness of yourself and just basically observing what's happening at the moment, like observing your sleep patterns, having some level of awareness around consistency. And if you are struggling with sleep, you've given some really good tools like the cold press and making sure that you're detaching from social media and just taking time to pause. So not going to the wrongness of yourself. I think that's we're all so different. And at this particular time, it's just such an awesome opportunity to reflect amongst everything else that's happening. Diane says hi. She's a night out.
Yes.
Hey, Seth, thanks for your comment as well. Cara, Nate, welcome. Christine's got a question. Did you want to take a question from Christine? She's mentioned she's had severe concussion 20 years ago, previous to an accident, and she dreamt in cinematography. I think that's I didn't quite.
So a lot of visuals, very, very narrative-like, as opposed to just kind of random thoughts or something.
Yeah.
So
afterwards, no dreams. When she started with the Oura Ring, found her REM sleep is sometimes as little as 10 minutes a night. So So what's your advice about how to explore this further? So whilst you think about that, can I just ask, elaborate on that a little bit? Do you mind talking to the different, like why we need a certain amount of REM sleep and why we need a certain amount of deep sleep? Is that something that you could easily answer?
Yeah, so let's see. Well, these different stages of sleep obviously perform different functions. Slow wave sleep is thought to be more restorative. There's more of, of clearing inflammation and kind of boosting the immune system. And also what's happening in the brain is more of this like reactivation, just rote reactivation of memories. Whereas during REM sleep, it's much more colorful. And I like that like cinematographic feel to it. So, it's more narrative. It can also be very bizarre, kind of avant-garde cinematography, right? Our dream world. And so there are different things happening. Now, you tend to get more of that slow wave sleep, that more restorative sleep in the first half of the night. And one of the functions of this is because, it's kind of just taking all of the information that we got across the day, all of the things that we did, and basically what we're doing is we're bringing all of these neurons up to a potentiated state, right? So they're kind of full. And then we're downscaling that. We're bringing everything down to a homeostasis. You mentioned homeostasis earlier. So bringing everything down back to baseline. So that's really important, and it serves a very important function. So that's happening mostly in the first half of the night. Now, in the second half of the night, that's when we tend to get more of the REM sleep. And so just they serve these different functions. Now, in order to there's some disagreement as to whether or not dreams solely occur in REM sleep. It tends to be more of your dreaming sleep simply because the conditions for that type of consciousness to arise it's just more, you're more likely to become consciously aware of the processes, of those memory processes that are occurring. And that's what dreams are, is a window into those memory processes. So you're just less likely to become consciously aware of those things during slow wave sleep. Now, that doesn't mean that it's not happening. It's totally happening. Just the phenomenological experience of it is very different. If you do become consciously aware during slow wave sleep, there's a different quality to it. It's more rote, thought-like. Whereas during REM sleep, it's, that much more of that cinematographical dreams. But so if you're only, to answer the question, if you're only getting 10-minute stints of REM sleep, so your REM periods elongate across the night. So maybe in the first 90-minute cycle, sometimes you just barely get 30 seconds of REM sleep, and then it increases to a few minutes, and then it increases, and then it's taking up a large proportion of that 90-minute cycle. And so by the time you hit that last huge REM period, that's when you have all those crazy dreams. So this is why right before you wake up, you're like, oh my gosh, I was having this crazy vivid dream. And it's because you have that nice unbroken chunk of REM sleep to really get into, that state. So if you're only getting 10-minute bursts of it, that's not going to be long enough to get into a REM cycle. But like I said, that doesn't mean that you're not dreaming. It's just that you're not becoming consciously aware of the dream state.
Okay. Is there anything that you would recommend for Christine to explore that further?
Let's see. I've never worked with somebody on this specific issue, but I have had some success with people simply setting an intention. The dream world is very, very sensitive to intentions, and I'm not really sure what the scientific reasoning behind that would be, but if you simply set an intention to dream, if you do that maybe 3 nights in a row, by the 3rd night, you will have a dream. Okay. So by keeping a dream journal is another way to kind of set that intention and get your mind focused on your dream state. And also to increase the probability that you'll be able to remember So by setting an intention, I've had people that struggled with their sleep, and what we ended up doing is having them set an intention to dream instead of intending to sleep, right? Because the more you try to sleep, the less you can sleep. So what we did is we set an intention to dream, and then suddenly they were getting much deeper sleep, much more REM sleep, and they did end up having dreams. So that's something that you can try.
I know for me, that's been the absolute, what's happened. I, about 2 weeks ago, started keeping a dream journal and wasn't really remembering many of my dreams before that. With that intention, now when I wake up, it's like, oh, I've got so much to write because there's just so much a recall of the dreams.
Yeah.
So it's something to try. So we've got a few more questions. Helen, Esther, Cara, I just thought maybe you might like to ask your questions live. If anyone's keen for that, do you mind just putting it in the chat and we'll do that? And also Diane. So question from Helen. Helen, did you want to come live and ask your question to Natalie, or would you prefer to do it as we just did for Christine? You could just let us know in the chat. Same for Esther, Diane, Cara. Let us know if you want to jump on. Because I do want to ask some more questions about the whole dream journal journey and how to interpret dreams. For me, like, that's just by keeping a dream journal, I feel that it's bringing that whole sleeping space alive for me, whereas previously it's just like you sleep and you wake up and then you're in this waking state of consciousness. But it's like I'm setting an intention as I go to sleep to really get meaning from my dreams, and then on rising, just recording them, and I feel them playing out throughout my waking state of consciousness, which is really cool.
What do you mean by that? You feel them playing out?
Well, I'm recalling glimpses of them in my day. Like, for example, let me think of an example. This is an example. I think maybe we talked about this, where I had a healing session, and then there was in this healing session. So I had a dream, and I dreamt about through COVID that we were going to create a new city, and for whatever reason, in this healing session, the healer, who had obviously no access to that story that I had, she said, "I'm getting something through that you're going to be part of creating a new city. I just need to say it. I'm just being told to actually say it." And I'm like, wow, that's, like, that would have been unconscious to me, but now it's like, that's conscious. That's just one example. Other than that, there's just like, just glimpses of dreams like coming to me throughout the day that are connecting my waking state of consciousness to that unconscious, what was totally unconscious, and adding a fullness and a richness to my just living, like, it's no longer just waking state of consciousness and sleeping state of consciousness, and just receiving insights for growth like that, like setting the intention. Like, for me, part of, and rightly or wrongly, I'm using that time and setting intention to receive, like, commune with powers that are greater than me, to receive messaging through my dreams. So the same way, like, when I meditate, I get insights. This is like using the dreams as insights.
Yeah, absolutely.
Rightly or wrongly. I think maybe I will just ask these questions for you because, so we might start with Helen. Thanks for your question. Are there ways to help relieve dreams that are triggered by COVID-19, like anxiety?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, there's this common misconception that bad dreams are bad. And one thing that I'll tell you, I have noticed certain symbols come up that are that are happening on a wide range of people. I can't say global because I don't have that kind of information. However, here at the University of Arizona, Nyman, I'm totally blanking on his first name. Ruben Nyman is doing a study, and he's actually collecting dream reports right now during the pandemic. It's going to be amazing. I'm so excited. I'm so happy that he's doing it, because I had the idea and was like, oh, I hope somebody's doing it. Not only are they doing it, but they're doing it where I live, here in Tucson, Arizona. So it's wonderful.
It's part of an academic study as well. That's even awesome.
Yeah, it's fabulous. So a couple of things that I've noticed just around people who I've talked to is things that are coming up are bugs, snakes, things that, like, critters that we feel threatened by, that are uncontrollable and kind of encroaching on our space, right? Whether it be our bodies or our house, right? So this is very telling, because these things are small. This I mean, it's like a virus, right? It's something that you can't control, that's kind of getting on you, and you can't, you feel not protected. So and biting, so kind of influencing our body autonomy. I mean, we're feeling like really out of control of our own bodies right now. This is a very sobering time in that respect. And also coming into our house. So, and that our house versus our body is, kind of our physical shell, whereas the house that we live in is more of a symbol for our psyche or our lives. So it can feel like this thing, and it might not be just the virus, but what the virus represents, the pandemic itself, sort of the maybe the political issues around it, the divisiveness around it, is coming into it's invading our lives right now. We cannot escape it. It's everywhere. Another thing that I've noticed is a lot of dreams about wanting to turn back the clock, wanting to go back in time, or these feelings like we should have known better. We should have protected ourselves, right? So a lot of this, recognizing the limits to the intellectual side of this, and feeling like with all the information in the world, it doesn't matter if you can't protect yourself. And so just recognizing the limitations of our own knowledge, because we didn't know, and there were things that could have been communicated better to us by our administration and people in charge. So a lot of people just kind of feeling like we should have known more. So really what's happening is we're hitting on collective emotional wounds, and it's consistent across all people. Everybody is experiencing this, but because we're all so different in the emotional wounds that we carry, it manifests differently for us, right? So we're all experiencing a shift out of normalcy and experiencing this lack of safety and scarcity. And so, but then, that's going to show up differently for each person, because they've experienced something different in their lifetimes, right? So, and this is reflected in your dream world as well. So all this to say, a very long-winded answer to a short question. Those dreams that you're having are a way for you to work through those emotional wounds. So, so welcome them. And yes, they're distressing, but people who dream during times of crisis, at 1 year follow-up, they end up showing reduced levels of depression and increased levels of life satisfaction. So simply by having those dreams right now, your body is doing the work for you. Your brain is doing the work for you. It's processing that emotional information and extracting what you need so that you can prepare for the future. So it's all good, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. So what came up for me when you were talking was it's kind of like we've got a shadow of what's in our unconscious, and sometimes we don't know what's in our unconscious because it's unconscious and it's past wounds and hurts, and it's at times like this where it can get brought to the light for us to consciously process and let go. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're working with a couple we're working with a particular memory system here that has two modes of storing information. You have a really fast mode of storing information, like that's an experience. Experiences are encoded very, very quickly. And then you have like the kind of slower way of learning and integrating information over time, and that's through repetition, right? So experience, repetition. What dreams are doing is it's taking the repetition side, like that kind of slow learning, gathering the information, finding out what's important, extracting the gist, being able to apply it to new situations. And it's kind of hacking the experiential system because it's creating an experience. So you can learn it more quickly. And actually people who pay attention to their dreams, and they've shown this in research out of Harvard, when you dream about a maze, you perform better on the maze the next day. So actually dreaming about this information is going to help you work through it and remember it better in the future.
Yeah, awesome. Cool. Question from Cara. Hey guys, very relevant conversation as I couldn't sleep last night. I'm too excited at having so much time to work on my own stuff. My QT, I think quality time, QT is how, my question maybe, is how should we capture and manage our sleep cycle over a longer period? Do you have a document? Do you document in a diary? Use a Fitbit? Any recommended tech?
Yeah. So Fitbit is going to be your best option for a wearable. However, if you probably a more economical option is going to be like a sleep cycle alarm clock or some sort of a smart alarm. I use Sleep Cycle. I have an iPhone, but I believe there's one for Android as well. And so what it does is it, picks up kind of the ambient sounds in the room, and then it gets an idea of when you're going to sleep, how many awakenings you have. And then it gives you a very generous sleep efficiency score. I'm not quite, these things, you don't know what their algorithm is because they're trade secrets, but so I don't know how they calculate it. But yeah, so these are some technological ways that you can track your sleep. And of course you can use a sleep diary, and that can also be beneficial because in the lab, what we do is if we're going to use something like a Fitbit or an accelerometer, we also have them track their sleep with a sleep diary, such that if you look at the sleep, the snapshot of the sleep from the device, and you compare that against their actual sleep diary, you can see where the device may have, counted the awakening incorrectly, or may have called you asleep, right? Because you were laying down watching Netflix, and that seemed like you were still in a sleep, but really you didn't get to sleep until an hour later, right? So it's going to capture those inconsistencies. And you can also capture those in real time, right? When you wake up and you look at the app and you're like, wow, that's not what my sleep was like at all. So a couple of things to keep in mind here. That is a really beneficial, it can be beneficial if you feel like your sleep is a lot worse than it actually is. So it's kind of a reality check and you're like, oh, I'm actually getting pretty good sleep. But it can also kind of go the other way. When you look, and this is what my last TransTech article was about, which is any statistician knows, if you look at individual data points, you're going to go crazy, right? You have to zoom out to get the big picture. I think this is kind of what the question was about too, is how can we get more of these trends across our sleep? So just putting this out there as a little warning, don't get obsessed with, I had a worse night of sleep tonight than I had last night, because, it's never a straight line. It's always kind of all over the place.
Yeah, we're human, and we live in this world where things happen, and you just can't get ideal sleep every night of the week. So
exactly.
It's a good question, good awareness to have, is just to look at it over time and look at an average. Question from Esther is how many hours before sleeping do you recommend shutting off social media and TV?
It depends on the individual. some people, some people can look at social media right before bed and not have any problem, right? But you're battling with a few things here. The first thing is, what I mentioned earlier, which is this sort of spike in the stress system because of the content of what you're looking at and how that relates to you and how that kind of triggers that, planning mechanism or that self-referential thought or the anxiety or what have you, right? And then kind of gives you a little boost of cortisol right when you're trying to get to sleep. So that's the first thing that you want to look out for. And then the second thing that you want to look out for, and this is true, whether we're in a global pandemic or not, but these devices emit bright light within the frequency of light that suppresses the neurotransmitters that are facilitated for sleep, such as melatonin. Okay, so not only are you getting a burst of cortisol, which needs to be low, but you're also suppressing melatonin, which makes you feel drowsy, is released in dim light conditions, which needs to be high in order for you to go to sleep. So what they say for that is to turn off any device. I mean, any sort of screens, your TV screen, your computer screen, even opening the refrigerator. Gosh, my refrigerator has the brightest light. And I have to, make sure not to do that at least 30 minutes before bedtime. And some people may be more sensitive to light, and it may need to be more like an hour. So it really depends on the individual. In terms of those stress neurotransmitters, another thing that comes in here is, whether or not you're one of these people that when you have a spike in your stress response, does it come down to baseline quickly? Or are you one of those people that kind of rides that wave for a little while? And you'll know within yourself whether you're, one of these people who can metabolize those stress neurotransmitters more quickly than somebody else. So you may need more like 2 hours. I say, keep it simple, keep it safe. Start, really winding down an hour to 2 hours before bedtime.
So off the back of that, what are another top 5 sleep hygiene best practice that people, if they are struggling to get to sleep, that they could consider? Because I know there's a sort of a list that you tick off. If you are struggling, fundamentally you should start with doing these.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. So that sleep consistency, having a consistent bed and wake time, that's always, top of the list. The other one is only using your bed for sleep and sex. So that stuff that you're doing where you're looking at, your phone, you're scrolling through your news feed, or heaven forbid, if you have a TV in your room, in your bedroom near your bed, and you tend to watch TV before you go to sleep. If somebody's struggling with sleep, that's the first thing that we want to do is move really anything. So if you have a work desk, any sort of screen, anything like that, because your bed and your bedroom needs to be associated with sleep only, right? And sex. So those are the 2 primary ones. Also, making sure not to eat within a certain amount of time before, your bedtime. Let's say you're going to bed at 10 p.m., making sure that your last meal is around 6 or 7. And what that does is that makes sure that, all of the resources that you're going to need aren't all pooling into your stomach and sort of throwing everything off. And, then you get this nice little burst of energy from the food that you just ate, but you're trying to go to sleep, right? Keeping any sort of routine consistent, right? So we all have our sleep hygiene, our bedtime routine, and really just treating that as a sacred time. If you value your sleep, if sleep is sacred to you, then you should treat it as such. Treat your bed as a sanctuary. Get dressed up, right? Do all the things, the ritual. There's a ritual behind sleep that really, honors it. And then your sleep will return that.
Wow, when you said ritual, I really just dropped into how much joy could that bring just by making sleep or going to sleep this beautiful ritual that you go into each night, and something to look forward to. And wow, that feels really nice. I really like that.
Yeah.
Question from Jeffrey. If you have trouble getting to sleep, but sleep well once finally asleep, is delaying bedtime a good idea?
If you are
If you're having trouble getting to sleep, but sleep well once finally asleep, is delaying bedtime a good idea?
So if I understand the question correctly, if you're having a hard time falling asleep, but then you finally do sleep well once you go to sleep, is it good to delay your bedtime?
That's the question.
Well, so it depends. What we tend to do with people who are struggling to fall asleep is we actually do a period of sleep restriction. So maybe for 4 to 5 weeks, sometimes 6 weeks. Actually for just a few weeks. So what we do is we calculate how much sleep are you actually getting. So a lot of times people go to sleep at the wrong time and then they lie there, right? And they look up at the ceiling. And now remember, your bed is supposed to be associated with sleep and sex only. And now suddenly you're associating your bed with not sleeping, lying there and looking up at the ceiling, and maybe even feeling anxious about the fact that you're not sleeping, clock watching, these other things. So we want to break that habit. So if you haven't fallen asleep within 10 or 15 minutes, you need to get up and go do something else, right? In dim light conditions, don't open the refrigerator, don't look at your phone. Grab a dictionary, or, I had a client who liked to read atlases. And so do something in dim light conditions that's fairly boring. And then once you start to feel sleepy again, then go back to sleep, right? And so the idea is to break that association with your bed and not sleeping and cultivate a relationship between your bed and sleep. And then, so in this way, your bedtime will be delayed naturally. And so what we're going to do is we're going to, try to take the sleep period that you have, which may be 9 hours, but you're only getting 6 hours of sleep in there. And then we would truncate it and say, okay, your opportunity to sleep is only within the 6-hour period. So this is called sleep restriction. And over time, once your sleep efficiency, which is how much of the time that you're actually in bed are you actually sleeping, once that gets up to 85-90%, then we could elongate it and say, you can sleep for 6.5 hours now, maybe 7 hours now, right? Give you an opportunity to sleep in that period. So, I mean, it's kind of that's how I would deal with this issue, and really there is going to be a delayed bedtime within there. But really, what you're trying to do is, if you haven't fallen asleep within 10-15 minutes by the time you get into bed, you need to get up and do something else.
Cool. Thanks, Diane. It's a great question. So Esther also mentioned the toughest thing for her is not having control. She can't stop people getting sick. Well, we can't stop people getting sick. I can't make people laugh or smile right now. How do I calm myself down from knowing that I don't have control over this?
Oh, that resonates so hard. That's really what that's it, man. That's really what we're all dealing with, which is a collective loss of control. And really what this shows us is that we never had control in the first place. And that's really uncomfortable, because we have so many delicious little illusions that we like to latch onto to pretend like we have control in the situation, right? Like I mentioned, cleaning my entire house. That's a nice way to feed that little illusion of control. So really what we're coming face to face with is that there's nothing different, except that it's just more obvious that we don't have control in this situation. And really our only recourse is to surrender. And surrendering is really hard because we want to pretend like we have control. And so there's this push and pull that happens. And that push and pull is where the anxiety and the resistance and the exhaustion comes from, is resisting the inevitable, which is ultimately surrender. And by surrender, I don't mean surrendering to somebody hurting you. I don't mean surrendering to self-limiting beliefs. I don't mean surrendering to patterns, maladaptive patterns or addictions, or, any of these things that
we still have to get
might
out of
be
bed,
difficult.
right? Still have to get out of bed and feed ourselves and
Yeah.
do stuff.
What I mean is surrendering to your emotions and where you are right now, meeting yourself where you're at right now. Hey, I am feeling really out of control. And I'm going to say hello to that. And that's okay. This is where pausing is going to be absolutely crucial. Just kind of meeting yourself where you're at and allowing yourself to feel it, because it sucks. It sucks.
See, for me, that's part of the magic. What's being we collectively have the opportunity to drop into is being faced with this sense of loss of control and surrendering, and just really dropping into having life catch us. And then, like, what is the next chapter? How does that look to it? How does that play out? How do we exist in that? And for me, that feels kind of exciting at the same time as it feels scary.
Yeah.
So
it's
growing pains, yeah. It's letting go.
pains.
It's kind of like letting go of one side and reaching for another, and you can't hold on to one side and go for the other side. So it's kind of like we just have to let go, and we're being forced to let go and surrender in this. So there's a beautiful opportunity for growth and pain and suffering for those that aren't willing to let go. So it's an ongoing conversation, and perhaps we could jump on another call and maybe pick up the conversation here, because for me, right here where we got to, and it's a great question, thank you, Esther, and then how our dreams might play a part in helping us to step more fully into who we are and how we let go and become a greater expression of who we can be, is that would be an exciting conversation to have with you, I feel.
Yeah, you want to do it next week?
Yeah, I'm keen. I'm always keen to chat, so let's do it.
All right.
Let's pigeonhole those as directions to take the conversation this week. We've gone an hour. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. Thanks for the great questions. It really did help to expand the conversation. Just by way of a little summary, so pausing was one of the key tips. Did you want me to do the summary, or would you like to do it?
Yeah, I mean, I can do it. So, pausing and taking time to meet yourself where you're at. And this is going to help you not only with the stress, but also, ultimately with your sleep as well. And then being kind to yourself and recognizing that anything that's going on, anything that you're feeling is normal right now. And don't compare. So I said, no news or social media before bed. Also, don't compare yourself to the other people on social media who are doing, a million different things. Because remember, when we post things on social media, there is more, people are kind of getting more vulnerable right now and getting into those ugly emotions a bit. But a lot of it's still, rose-colored glasses. So don't compare yourself to that, because it's not real. Keeping a regular sleep schedule is absolutely crucial. It's very tempting to, oversleep, but really this is part of self-care, is, really honoring your sleep and treating it like a ritual, something that you're looking forward to. And in order to do that, you need to really honor it.
You've inspired me to go out and get some new sheets and some new pajamas, that's that whole having sleep as a ritual, like this beautiful thing that we get to dive into each night is fantastic. Thanks, Natalie.
Thank you so much, Troy.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Alison, Christine, Esther, Helen, Diane, aka Jeffrey, Juan, Cara, Paul, Simone, Zenik, and there's Natalie also, and Nathan. Thank you so much, and Glenn, for tuning in. So we'll set up next week and pick up the conversation where we left off. I'm really excited to delve into that. I feel like that's the opportunity that we have right now collectively, is to really surrender, let go, and then go, what else? What's next? And how do we, a butterfly emerging from its chrysalis. How do we become that?
Yes.
Yes. Thanks, Natalie. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.